Welcome. I'm Eleanor Burns. I'm glad you could join me in the woods. Since I was young, I felt I was born in the wrong century. Well, perhaps I should have been born in the 19th century. I've always imagined myself carving my way through the wilderness. I would scare away the wild animals and then build a log cabin out of the tallest pines I could find. I wonder how I'd be swinging an axe. For Thanksgiving, I'd stir up a big pot of bear stew for my sons. And on Christmas Day, we'd feast on stuffed goose. But alas, I was born in 1945 and missed that whole part of our country's history. At least I can study the legacy our foremothers left behind in their quilt. The quilt patterns and the names tell the story of the settler. Well, Sue Bouchard designed a new quilt using 4 of their basic blocks to help tell that story. It's a quilt called Bears in the Woods. The center part of this quilt is made of 12 log cabin blocks with traditional red chimneys and 8 different blue logs. It was the Pennsylvania Germans who were responsible for the adoption of the log cabin. Well, at least I am Pennsylvania German. The settlers were grateful for the pines. Their tall, straight trunks saved them many hours of construction as logs were easily notched and layered together. You can see the laid logs in this corner construction. Well, these 20 tree blocks are refreshing, made in varying shades of green. Early settlers didn't need to worry about food, as the skies, lakes, and streams offered plenty of wildfowl to eat. Well, perhaps it was out of fear the pioneer quilt maker designed the first Bears Paw blocks. Now I can just imagine a settler family on the other side of this door as the bears pawed away, wanting to get in there. Ooh, it's scary. Well, I would be respectful of the bears and dedicate a quilt block to them. With my easy grid method of construction, the Bears Paw block is not scary at all. Well, Flying Geese blocks flock to the edges of this quilt in a collection of homespun blues. Now you can go ahead and use the same blues as you used on your log cabin blocks, or just dig into your scraps just like the settlers did and come up with some different fabrics. No, I didn't live with the settlers, but I have come to love their holiday traditions. Thanksgiving and Christmas are perfect times to decorate your homes with quilts and bits and pieces from the great outdoors. As we learn how to make each of these 4 blocks, we'll also create some new quilts and projects for our own homespun holidays. And we'll make a tree skirt, some gift boxes out of quilt patches, and even some festive Christmas stockings. Well, let's go back to the 20th century and begin on our Bears in the Woods quilt. That fresh air is wonderful. I could spend all day outside, but we need to get sewing because those holidays are on their way. This is the log cabin quilt, one of America's favorite patterns. Now, many were made in the 1850s to the 1890s, and I believe to commemorate our beloved president, Abraham Lincoln. They were often made out of wool, as this one is. This is actually the barn raising pattern, just the very center of it. And the quilt maker did a technique called foundation piecing. Now you can see the foundation right here, and she took the strips and actually sewed them on the right side from that center right around that chimney, and then just set all of those blocks together, completely hand done. You know, in Pennsylvania, they referred to wool quilts as haps. What a great name. Well, in the Victorian era, they also loved the log cabin block, but this time they took more elegant fabrics as silks and brocades. This one is also sewn on a foundation, and the quilt maker this time did some beautiful hand stitchery around those logs. But today I want to focus on the homespun log cabin quilt. This is a 12 block lap robe size, and it's set together with lattice and cornerstones right here in the center, red traditionally for the chimney, and then there are 8 light logs going out on one side and then 8 dark logs coming out on the other side. Well, it's just a beautiful quilt. Sue Bouchard called it Timberline, and it's perfect in all those green woodsy fabrics. This is the miniature of the Bears in the Woods quilt. Now we want to focus on the fabric, but I'm going to tell you the yardage for the full-size quilt. You'll just need a little less for a smaller quilt like this. Start with the bear's paws. There are 4 bear's paws, 1 in each corner, and you need to have, for the paw right here, 3/8 of a yard. Those claws take 1/3 of a yard, not much fabric. There are 20 trees in the quilt. You need to have 2 trunk fabrics right here. 1/8 yard of each one of those fabrics will do, plus go ahead and select 8 different greens. 1/4 yard pieces will do you. Now, as you're selecting your greens, remember to vary the scales of your prints and also the values so that you can go ahead and have interesting trees. These are the pieces for the log cabin. Oh, I like that traditional red right in the center. Now, if you use this red in the log cabin center, you can also use it in the bear's paw center. Oh, probably 1/4 of a yard will be great. And that background fabric, you need at least 6.5 yards. That's a lot of background fabric, isn't it? Now, the log cabin blocks come from 8 different blues. Go ahead and select the first 3 just 1/8 yard pieces. The second 3 you need to have 1/4 yard pieces, and then those last 2 you need to have 1/3 yard pieces. And if you'd like to go ahead and use that same blue in the Flying Geese border, pick up an additional 1/4 yard of each one of those pieces. Now I'm going to use the same background throughout this quilt, so let me just go ahead, move these pieces aside. Boy, I need lots of room for cutting. I want to start cutting pieces for the log cabin strip. And the center is just a 2.5 inch strip. I'm just going to lay it straight on the grid, get things out of the way, use the ruler cutter combination tool. Now it was torn from the bolt, so let me just go ahead, line it up right along that edge, that torn edge. Just cut off that edge in the beginning, get rid of that, and cut a 2.5 inch strip. Now for 12 blocks in the log cabin, you really just need to have 1 2.5 inch strip. Oh, let me move that down. Got to keep that within the ruler lines so that I get cuts on both the ends. Oh, that's pretty good. 1 2.5 inch strip for the log cabin, and this can be used for the center of the bear's paw. Now all of the rest of the pieces are 1 3/4 inches wide. This is the background fabric that I'm going to use throughout the quilt. They are 1 3/4 inches, and also all of the dark logs are cut 1 3/4 inches. So just line up the ruler at 1 3/4 inches. Hold that ruler in place. Just push away from you. You can actually go ahead and layer cut if you like, but get all of your blues cut. Get ready for sewing. Boy, let me get to work. I'll get that done. This is one of the 12 blocks that make up the center star in the Bears in the Woods quilt. Its finished size is 12 inches. Now it has the red center, all the same background on one side, and then the 8 blues make up the dark side. Now in the sewing process, you start right here with the center, add a light background strip to it once, and then a second background, and then it goes into the darks. The first dark and the second dark, and then it just continues away from that center square the whole way out to the outside edge. Now, so I don't get confused, and that's easy to do once you start sewing and talking. I have all my strips lined up in sewing order, and this is how it goes. You start right here with the center strip, and then I place 2 of the background strips side by side. This is the first dark and the second dark, and so on down, 2 backgrounds, third dark, fourth dark. And so once you get that in order, boy, you'll never make any mistakes. So pick up the first strip, the 2.5-inch strip, put it right sides together with the 1 3/4-inch strip. Now I have my serger set at a scant 1/4 inch. I actually have a piece of foam right here so I can keep that scant 1/4 the whole way through, because you want this block to end up being 12.5 inches so that it fits together with all of the other blocks. So just step on that gas, put those strips right sides together. Now, you really need to go the whole way down the strip, but I'm just going to work on a few of the blocks just to show you the technique. Once you have it sewn down that strip, go ahead, use your rotary cutter and your ruler and square off the left end. Oh, just take a cut right there. Take this piece, get rid of that, and line it up. Line up your ruler, 6x12 or 6x6 is just a great one. Cut it into 2.5-inch segments. Just cut, 12 is the total number. I think I'll just do 4 of them just to show you the technique. Okay, now stack them up. Don't need that center or that first background any longer, so I'm just going to take that, get that off my table. Now, I don't like to press these with the iron. I prefer to finger press them because I think that there's less distortion in the block. So I'm just going to lift up that strip and finger press it open. Have that center right here. Finger press each one of those strips. Oh, let me get the next one. And then once you have every strip pressed open and flat, then just turn that stack over so that the last piece you added on is at the top. That's a rule that you want to follow. The last piece is at the top. Now, I used the background once. I need to add a second background strip. So I'm just going to take this next strip, and I actually like to just lift up the edge of the serger, the foot on the serger, and anchor that strip. Same thing with a regular sewing machine too. Doesn't matter, the serger is just actually quicker. And just place that so that the strip is perpendicular. The last strip is perpendicular with this one right here. Ooh, looking good. And once you get that anchored, grab hold of the opposite end so that you don't have any tucks right here in this seam. And then just hold that flat as you sew over it. Now, the best thing is the assembly line sewing. You get that first piece right, you just butt on every single one right behind it. Get the first one right, you'll get them all right. Well, if you get the first one wrong, you're going to get every one wrong. Oh my goodness. So just butt them right behind. Now if you leave a little space, it doesn't really matter because you can go ahead and just trim that out of there. Get rid of that little extra. Well, 4 for a demo. All lined up on here. Once they are all sewn onto that strip, just lay your strip flat on your mat, on your grid, line that up, take that little piece right over here, and right now, make sure that you keep the ruler lined up with the strip and go right down in between where you butt them together, cut them apart. Oh, get that right close. Now see, there's just a tad right there, a little bit extra. I didn't butt it as closely as I could have, so you can just go ahead and cut that little bit out. Just keep on going. One more piece right across here, little bit extra, and cut each one of the blocks apart. Let's see it from the opposite side now. Okay, center, first background and second background added on the outside edge. Let me just take these pieces, stack them up, gonna turn them over and just go ahead and finger press that seam open. Ooh, let's get these going. Press those up there flat. Now, when you're working on the miniature quilt, the finished size of the block is only 6 inches square. You're going to just be using 1 1/8 inch strips. And if you would go ahead and take each one of those little 1 1/8 inch strips and press them on the iron, chances are good your blocks will be distorted by the time you're done. So that's why I like to finger press. Okay, second background. Used it twice, just get rid of it. We're going down that line so that we're now ready for first dark. Okay, pick up the first dark strip anchor it in your sewing machine. Just tip up that foot, scant 1/4 inch seam, and then take the last strip that you added on, which is this one, last strip that you added on, and just place it right to the top. Just get that under there, lay it flat. Grab right here the opposite end, lay that seam flat as you put it underneath your sewing machine, and just continuously butt these one after the other. Oh, this is just like eating popcorn. You get started with this and you can't stop. Well, I'm just going to tell you a little quilt fable as I sew through this. You know, we're all familiar with Abraham Lincoln, the log cabin. Well, there's a great story, don't know if it's true or not, that perhaps goes along with his special log cabin. Well, there was a young woman by the name of Mrs. Davis, and she was commissioned to make a quilt for a friend. So she made that quilt for a friend, and she gave it to her daughter, Mary Elizabeth. I'm just going to go ahead and cut these apart right here and stack them up and keep on telling you that story. Move these over a bit right here. One more cut, and actually stack these up, turn these over. First dark, used once, just get rid of it because we have to move right down, pick up the second dark, and anchor it right in the sewing machine. Just keep on going. Anyhow, Mrs. Davis finished the quilt, and she sent off Mary Elizabeth to deliver this beautiful finished quilt. Oh, she was a young girl. It was 1860s. Trains were going through town. She stopped at the train station and she met up with some of her friends. And her friends were just standing there waiting to meet an actor they knew. His name was Edmund Booth. And as she waited to meet this actor, all of a sudden there was a big puddle. A wagon went past, went through the puddle, splashed up on this person standing beside them. Mary Elizabeth was so upset, she took the quilt and cleaned off the person. Well, she went on to deliver the quilt. The person didn't want the quilt, of course, too dirty. Mary Elizabeth took it home and gave it to her mother. And she was sad, but she said, Mary Elizabeth, you did the right thing. Well, a few weeks later, Mary Todd Lincoln sent Mary Elizabeth a letter and said, thank you for cleaning up my son at the train station that day. So it was a good log cabin story. I just want to show you one more piece right here with this. As I butt this block right behind, I have that center. I'm pushing the seam up away from the center here, and this seam is going down away from the center. And that is the technique. You just keep on pushing those blocks through. Now there's always going to be those two seams. Always the first seam goes up, the second seam goes down. You just cut them apart each time and just stack them up, turn them over, and keep on sewing. Look at that, it's looking great. So now all you have to do is add on 2 background strips and the next third and fourth dark. Let me just keep on sewing with these blocks. I set aside my 12.5-inch log cabin blocks until I'm done with the rest of them for my Bears in the Woods quilt. Then I'll show you how to set that whole quilt together. But first I want to show you how to take some miniature log cabin blocks and turn them into some great wall hangings for the holidays. Now this one looks like a whole forest of trees in the woods, doesn't it? Now there are 6.5-inch blocks in this quilt. There's 16 of them. 4 blocks across and 4 blocks down. And this is how you should do it. First of all, take your fabric and go ahead and sew your blocks so that you just have the center, 3 rounds of light and 3 rounds of dark. And then separate them out into 2 separate piles. You're going to put 8 in one stack, 8 in the other. And with those first 8, continue sewing them and adding the whole round of light and the round of dark around the outside edge, just as I showed you on the larger blocks. Finish them up because these 8 blocks end up in the quilt in different positions. Look, you can see there the whole way across that top row, no trunks in there. These 2 pieces are the same, and then the 2 corner blocks look exactly like this. But now we've got to figure out how to get that trunk in that tree. So take 2 blocks, let's form the tree right here, and turn them so that you create the peak on the tree. And then take your brown that's going to become the trunk and just line them up right underneath so you can see it forming. Now these blocks are going to end up like this. Here's the light turned in this direction and the light turned in this direction. Now we've really got to do some more sewing. We have to add one more light strip. So once it's laid out, you'll see that one light strip goes right here and one light strip right there. That's looking good. Now all we have to do is add another green round the whole way around the outside edge on opposite sides, and then we have the green that's just going to come right down in this area and finish off the blocks looking like a great tree. And then you can see you've got all of these trees with trunks growing in your forest for Christmas. Christmas projects are fun, but we still have time for Thanksgiving. You can serve up a feast for your eyes with this Harvest Log Cabin Table Runner. Now it's made with 16 miniature blocks again, and right here it's just 2 blocks across and 8 blocks long. Now start with the 4 right in the center, turn the lights right into the middle, and then work that pattern right off of that center. And if this table runner is too long, you can actually make it shorter just by cutting off those 2 outside rows. Now this piece of fabric, the autumn leaves, was my inspiration for the logs in the quilt. Just pulled those colors right out of there. And then I added a folded border as an accent around it. Well, I thought, what if I don't have a great table centerpiece? And I decided to do some appliqué autumn leaves right in the center. This is how I did it. I took this leaf and photocopied it and enlarged it to make this template. Then I took the template and traced it on fusible interfacing. Next I paired it up with some fabric and just stitched right on that line. Couldn't be easier. Fusing is on the back. And then I just turned it right side out right through this hole. Now have a couple of leaves. All I have to do is just go ahead, put that right in the center. The fusing is on the back. I can put 4 all around there, applique some stems coming right off the end, do some blanket stitching either by hand or machine to finish off that centerpiece. And it's just a great Thanksgiving feast for the eyes. I love to come up to the attic and look through my collection of antique blocks. Now this is one of my favorite pieces of artwork. It's made with 2 antique log cabin blocks set together in the fields and furrows pattern, and then the barn is stitched in thread. It's the true meaning of the pattern. Now there are so many different ways that you can set together the log cabin block, but fields and furrows is one of the oldest. Now when you set those blocks together, you focus on the dark part of the block. The first one is set in a 7. The one beside it is set in an L arrangement. And then you just keep on alternating between the 7s and L's to create that effect of the newly plowed field. Well, I felt that any stack of blocks would look great in the fields and furrows pattern, but this stack of blocks made during the Depression was quite a challenge. First of all, the quilt maker used this very bright orange in the center, and I thought, well, if I just put a pink there, another popular color, that'll look great. But after placing it, I decided to just go ahead and leave that orange as the original quilt maker wanted. Well, talking about pink, this is a very interesting piece of fabric sewn right into the block with bits of children at the beach. Now this reproduction fabric, just recently made, also has children playing at the beach with their little trowel shovel right here. It's so cute, and I just love this one. Little girl with blonde hair, her shovel, her little dog beside her. It's great fun. Well, I took 6 of those blocks and sewed them together, and it just looks confusing to me. I couldn't get anything going. So I decided to set the blocks together with lattice and cornerstones, and now it's giving some unity to it. Right here, I'm going to place this block, reproduction purple, in the L shape and right beside it. Then I'll place a 7. Now I really like the quilt, and sometime soon I'll sew it together and I'll show it to you. Now, the log cabin has always been a part of American history, and it's an important part of my history as well, because the log cabin is the very first quilt that I ever made. Now, the log cabin block represents life itself, with the hearth or the red in the center, and then the light side and the dark side. The light side is the sun, and then the shadow, or the good days and the sad days. So you enjoy those light days making your log cabin blocks.